Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our 30-minute 2018 Chamber of the Year process webinar. On the registrant list today, I see some repeat applicants as well as some new interested chambers, which is really exciting for the program. My name is Michelle DeGraff, and I'll be your main point of contact as you move forward in this Chamber of the Year process. I am joined by Christy Gillenwater, who's President and CEO of the Chattanooga Chamber. Christy wears a ton of hats here at ACCE. She's a board member, Chamber of the Year Committee Chairwoman, and she serves as a judge. She did lead the Southwest Indiana Chamber to win Chamber of the Year in 2016, and before that, led the Greater Bloomington Chamber to victory in 2012. So we're very fortunate to have her on this webinar to really give an insider perspective on the Chamber of the Year process. At the end of the presentation, we will be answering any questions you may have. If you have a question at any time during the presentation, please type it into the questions box on the side of your screen, and we'll try to get to all the questions at the end of the overview. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Christy to give a quick overview of the Chamber of the Year Award and what we're going to be learning about on today's webinar. Christy?
Well, thank you, Michelle, and hello, everyone. We're so excited to have your interest in today's webinar and your interest in the Chamber of the Year process. As you know, Chamber of the Year is an extremely prestigious award, and with prestigious awards, there are often many layers, as are in this case. And so this webinar today is designed to give you an overview of the process. Now, please note, all of the information we are showing you today is found online at the ACCE website, and we will follow up with these presentation slides and hyperlinks. You can also download this presentation now from the side panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christy. So in order to start, the first thing I want to quickly mention is that because the application process is very involved, anyone who's been through it before knows that there's certain steps you must take in order to really advance through the process. And the first of these steps is qualifying. So before you even apply, you must meet certain criteria in order to be invited to apply. The first step is in qualifying is to put your inputting your operations data through our dynamic chamber benchmarking platform. So on a side note, I do want to mention that dynamic chamber benchmarking is an ongoing year-long process where you could put in your chamber stats related to finances and operations, and it's a really great tool to allow you to download reports and benchmark your data against similar chambers. It's also free and available to ACCE members at any time. But what does this mean for you and Chamber of the Year? So within our dynamic chamber benchmarking platform, you do have to complete what we call the operations survey. You have to complete the survey by March 1st in order to be considered for Chamber of the Year eligibility. So this is your first key date. You have to have your numbers in by March 1st. So I'm going to quickly show you what dynamic chamber benchmark does look like, just so you can get an idea. When you log into the platform, which you can access through ACCE's website, you'll see this is the home page, and you'll see there's two sections. There's an operations section and a salary survey section. You'll only see the salary survey if you are a CEO. What we're going to focus on today is that operations piece. So in the operations survey, you'll have questions related to finances, membership, as well as a chamber profile that you need to complete. When you click into the operations survey, you'll notice I have circled here where it says year 2017. It's very important that you make sure you put in your fiscal year 2017 numbers. This should automatically be toggled to year 2017, but I always encourage you just to double check and make sure that it says year 2017. I also want to note that there is a lot of information you have to put in, and I know sometimes it's a lot to do. If you did input your data in 2016, we have this great feature called Copy Prior Year Data, where you could copy over all your information from the year before and then just change any numbers that you see fit or as needed, and that will save a lot of time. We also have a 24/7 chat where you could chat with our reference librarian, and she can answer any questions and help you input data, and we can also connect you with her directly if you have questions about the process or inputting your data. Another thing to note, and the reason I called out the chamber profile section within this platform, is when you go to your chamber profile, you'll notice there is a question at the bottom called Chamber of the Year Award. Please mark yes to that question if you are interested in applying. The reason for that is once we pull your numbers to assess whether you qualify or not, we're going to prioritize the folks who said that they are interested in applying, and we're going to run those numbers first and let you know first. So we want to make sure that you're included in that first batch of analysis. So please mark yes to that. Now the qualification criteria. So when we take your numbers from dynamic chamber benchmarking, we're really looking at 5 factors to decide whether or not you're eligible to apply for Chamber of the Year. You must meet 3 out of the 5 factors that are listed on your screen. I'm not going to go through them all just because you are able to download this. You can look at them more in detail if you want, but essentially any of the 3 out of the 5 requirements that are related, they're related to membership and financial strength. As long as you meet 3 out of those 5, you will be eligible to apply. And the qualification notice. So after you input your data and we'll pull it and apply all of our numbers to it, we'll notify you no later than March 12th via email and invite you to apply for Chamber of the Year. That same week, we will have what we call our Successful Applications Conference Call, and Christy will talk a little bit more about that, but it's a really informal conference call to help prepare you for applying for the Chamber of the Year award. One thing to also note is after you put in your operations information, and let's say you have qualified to apply and you've invited to apply, the next step is for ACCE to assess what category you're going to compete in. So if you've ever seen a list of finalists for Chamber of the Year that we announce every year, we'll announce them in specific categories, such as the finalists in Category 1 or Category 3. And those categories really align with chambers of similar size and capacity. So we want to make sure that the competition is fair and you're competing against chambers of, like I said, similar size to yours. So you'll see the factors on your screen. We'll run a formula based on those, and we pull those numbers from what you give us in dynamic chamber benchmarking as well. We'll pull numbers and we'll apply a formula to it to figure out which category you fit in best with. It's important to also know that any chamber from a state chamber or a provincial chamber in Canada will automatically be placed into the state province category. I've also shown on your screen, if you want to look at later after you download the presentation, is just a really detailed summary of the competition categories. So you could sort of get a feel for where you may fall into, but I wouldn't get too hung up because the factors take on multiple different angles. The formula we use is the best bet for figuring out where you fall in, but this is a good way to kind of get an idea of where you would fall in those categories. So now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Christy to talk a little bit more about applying, sort of the reality of applying and what to expect as you go through the process.
All right, thanks, Michelle. So the reality is it's an intense process, right? And rightfully so, because like we said earlier, it's a prestigious award. But it's exciting. If you qualify, that's a feat in itself. So now that your chamber has been qualified to apply, the next step is to apply. And on your screen there, you'll see the key dates that you need to know when applying. And you'll have roughly 5 weeks from when you're notified to actually submit the application. And a few days after the notification, please note that we will host a conference call detailing how to submit a competitive application. It will go over submission specifics as well as topics such as what makes a successful synopsis. And the application includes the following components that are shown on your screen there, okay? And our short answer questions, I want to note this. So you're all familiar with the Horizon Initiative and the importance of Horizon and how it is really helping to lead chambers throughout the country as well as ACCE. And one of the things that our very mindful and thoughtful, amazing Chamber of the Year committee, comprised of judges throughout the country, discussed last year as we did a recap, we said, hey, we need to be more thoughtful about the application and aligning the application with the Horizon report. So you will see that this year we have some Horizon-focused questions. And these new questions really are in the short answer component, okay? So the short answer component has really changed a bit this year in terms of what the questions look like and what they ask. The synopses have stayed the same, and again, you can download the application on the side panel of the screen. Now, talking about the reality of applying, this application really requires the input from many members of your team. And I know, as Michelle indicated, I've worked with 2 chambers where we were able to garner the prestigious Chamber of the Year award. And both times I was intense on it. And working with a team, I started building the team now, actually. Once we completed our dynamic chamber benchmarking survey, we started going on this. We started thinking about the synopses, et cetera. But you need to start thinking about who from your team need to start carving out time. Right? The marketing team and the CEO are really key. Your key leadership team member who is going to set aside the time, the majority of their time, to work on this, particularly in the final 3 weeks before the application is due. It is a very intense time. I can tell you in Southwest Indiana, I mean, there were a few people, that's all they did for 3 weeks. It was intense, and it was a lot of my time as the CEO as well. And you guys have a lot to be proud of, right? You've made it this far, and it's a chance to tell your story. And it's important to have multiple team members involved in the writing, right? You need subject matter experts, but you really need that one person to help create and craft the overall tone, that one voice that is your chamber's voice. And be mindful about answering the questions. You know, I know I hear from other judges, oh, geez, you know, so-and-so hasn't, or not so-and-so, but this chamber I'm reviewing hasn't responded to the question. It seems simple, but it's amazing how people do not clearly answer the questions, or they'll give incomplete answers. So really be mindful about the word limit and the questions that are being asked. And do not wait for the last minute to hit submit, because you really have to think about the flow of your information and how easy you are making it for someone to judge your application. That's something else that judges really pay attention to. Did I have to work hard to find the information, to find the attachments, or was it thoughtfully embedded and in the right place, right? So don't underestimate the time that's needed to embed all of this and really think through how everything flows together. And it's also very important, I can't overstate enough, to be careful on how you choose your synopses. Really select programs and services that are unique and are nationally relevant for our industry and organizations, an organization of your size. You know, we're looking for the best and most innovative programs. So something that everyone does, if it's kind of a standard chamber program, you might rethink that. Or if it's a case where, okay, maybe it's somewhat standard, but your spin on it, what you are doing, is so different from what you're seeing from other chambers, then really tell that angle of the story. And I can't overstate enough the resources of prior winners, of Michelle, when it really comes to thoughtfully thinking through your synopses and what you're contemplating submitting. And you want to organize your response exactly as the application is organized, right? You want to label your components as they are labeled in the application. And again, your answers and responses should be very easy to find. Again, seems intuitive, but speaking from experience, it's important to emphasize that. And we also want you to start thinking about who should represent you and participate in the interview should you be named a finalist. You know, their organizational information and comprehension of your chamber should really be broad. Some chambers use 2 staff members, the CEO and a senior team member. Others use a volunteer, a board chair, an incoming chair, etc. So there are different options, and being mindful about that is very critical. And the judging side, on the judging side, as you move from application to being told that you're a finalist is really going to hinge on the application process itself and the judging. So there is a judging panel comprised of past Chamber of the Year winners, board members, and veteran CEOs. And I might tell you they are they take this very seriously. They're very proud of the role that they play in the process, as they should be, because it is very time consuming and it's very thoughtful. And we have amazing judges who really deliberate and decipher the information that you submit in a thoughtful way. And just so you all know, 1/3 of your application score is comprised of the short answer questions and submitting those required associated documents. And 2/3 is based on your program synopses. So again, the importance of honing those synopses down and starting to think about those now. And key dates you'll see are shown on the screen here. Finalists will be announced on June 11th. Interviews will take place at the ACCE National Convention in Des Moines, Iowa this summer. And then winners will be announced at the convention awards ceremony. Again, a major ceremony, a big deal, a wonderful opportunity for you to showcase your chamber should you be a finalist, and obviously also should you be selected. But even making it to the finalist round is a huge feat, considering how absolutely competitive this process is and how amazing the depth and breadth of chambers are in our association. Now, what you can do now in closing that I would encourage you to do is talk with past winners, talk with board members and your team to assess whether this is the right year for you to apply. Did you have that killer year last year, right? Browse some of the sample synopses from past winners and listen to the winner webinar series from 2015. Mind you, the 2016 webinars will be starting very soon. So the winners from last year will be featured in a series of webinars starting very soon. And you want to ensure your fiscal year 2017 financials are in order, and obviously begin inputting your fiscal year 2017 data into dynamic chamber benchmarking. And please ask questions for us today. We do have some time allotted for questions. And we want you to peruse the Chamber of the Year web pages, and feel free also, like I said, I cannot understate Michelle's guidance through this process. She's been with us leading the Chamber of the Year process for a number of years now, so she has vast knowledge about what it takes to be successful. And be confident, be confident about what your chamber's doing. We are all privileged to be a part of this amazing industry, helping to drive communities and drive regions and our members to the next century. And it's important work that we do. So be proud of the work that you do, be confident, and please do submit. We are thrilled to have such interest in our Chamber of the Year process. So again, at this time, we will go ahead and take your questions, but can't thank you enough for being in our industry, for being a part of ACCE, and being on the call today. So with that, Michelle, let's take a look at some questions.
Great. Thank you, Christy. We already have some coming in, and if you have any more, please just put it in the questions box. So the first one, Christy, I'm going to ask you. You mentioned when you're thinking about how you're going to answer some of the questions on the application, and you mentioned the idea of responding to the questions and really getting to that. Any ideas or tips on how to assess whether or not you've really responded well to the question?
Great question there. And by the way, I would always start out with kind of an outline, bullet points. I usually started that, especially for the areas I felt like I had a lot of subject expertise in terms of being the CEO, and would double check when other team members wrote for those sections. Did I feel like those bullets that I thought needed to be reflected were in there? So that's one thing, and really looking at the question and studying the question myself. Second thing, I would always ask someone a little bit removed in the chamber, and you know who this person is, whether they're a volunteer or they're on your staff, where they're very literal and they take everything, exactly as they hear it. Ask them to review the application, the questions, and how you've responded, and if they feel like you have properly answered the questions, right? Because getting that outside perspective, not necessarily maybe the CEO or the core team working on the application, because they have been living and breathing it. And try to bring this person involved even in kind of that earlier stage draft. I mean, you don't want them doing this work in the final week it's due, but can it be a month out or so, 3 weeks out, where they're really assessing, have we answered the question? Because you do also have word count challenges that you're running against, so you need to be mindful of that.
Thank you so much. The other question again is really for you too. When you're looking at, when judges are looking through the application, there are certain parts where you're supposed to be adding supplemental information and attachments. So how many attachments are too many? And do you have any recommendations on what to include when you ask for supplemental information?
Great question. We'll definitely include at minimum, what is being requested. In terms of what is too much, really look at the relevancy of what you're talking about in that section. So, for example, if you have a synopsis and you're pretty proud of some of your marketing materials or associated materials that help tell that story beyond the word limit that you're given, don't create something just for that purpose. But if you have something that you can articulate the importance of that piece to your overall story in that section of the application, feel free to use that. I mean, there are definitely numerous winners in the past who had a series of attachments, but they were always relevant to that segment of the application and further told the story that was being framed in that portion of the application. So I can't necessarily tell you, 2 per section because it doesn't really work that way, but also be in the mind of a volunteer judge. Are you overwhelming them with too many attachments, and are you placing them in the right spots so that it makes natural sense as it relates to where they are located, right? So being real thoughtful and mindful about that. Is 10 in one section too many? Possibly, but again, if done well, I think that's more of the key. Michelle, feel free to make amendments to that or edits.
I agree with what you're saying, and I also recommend too, a lot of, we're seeing a trend too where a lot of the applications are becoming clickable, and it's a lot easier to include a lot more supplemental information if it's in a hyperlink within the PDF of a synopsis. That means that a judge has a lot less to scroll through, and they could choose to open a hyperlink if they want more information. So I would utilize hyperlink features and the different features that Adobe PDF does have now with that type of thing to help alleviate some of the anxiety you might have about, is this too much? Because then a judge would just not click on it, or they click on it and quickly shut it away versus having to search through multiple PDFs to find one document that you may reference. So just keep that in mind as well. And that's actually perfect because it segues into the next question we have about Dropbox. Someone asked if we can please elaborate on the submission via Dropbox. So I'll take that one very quickly. Essentially, once you have compiled your application, you're going to put your entire application in Dropbox. We're going to ask you to put one folder that's your sort of entryway folder that's basically the name of your chamber and Chamber of the Year application. So for example, let's put Michelle Chamber of Commerce application. And then from there you would click in and you would have different sections. You'd have your section 1 information, section 2 information, section 3 information, and then section 4, which are your program synopses. So what you would do is once you put your application together, and if you want to make sure that it's organized correctly, you can shoot me over a draft of how you've structured it, and I can let you know, yeah, that's good, or, that's a little confusing. You might want to move this here or something like that. I'm happy to do that. Once you go ahead, you would share with me the entire file, and all you would do is send it via Dropbox. You would share it with my email address, which is mdegraff@acce.org. And then I would download it onto our internal server, Dropbox. And you'll be notified within 24 hours that the application was received and downloaded and everything looks good. So if there's we'll go in more detail about it, but the main thing with Dropbox is to really make sure your folders are organized correctly. So we have two questions that are similar. So Christy, I'm going to hand this one to you. If you applied in previous years, would you consider submitting the same synopses as long as you changed some of the data with it to be more in line with this previous year, or do you recommend choosing completely new synopses to highlight?
Okay, good question. So typically with the synopses, we're looking at kind of a 2-year window. What have you done in the last 2 years on this initiative, right? So definitely I think framing the last 2 years are going to be key first. Second, depending on what kind of feedback you received, if the feedback was one of the synopses wasn't as innovative, obviously that one I would look at pretty seriously and try to determine another opportunity to write about within your chamber. At the same time, if you didn't receive, constructive feedback, or if you did, but it was something you fixed and you can articulate that, definitely still move forward, I think, with that one. If there wasn't constructive, though, I would definitely look at updating it, but definitely also maybe seek Michelle's input or, again, another board member or potentially a former winner about what are their thoughts and provide them with some framing around what you've selected and why, and see if they feel like it's innovative enough, or if you should articulate it in a different way to really showcase why it is indeed innovative for your region and why you think it's critical to still submit as such. That would be my recommendation. So again, reach out to Michelle, reach out to other judges, and find out what the feedback was on your application from last year, and that should help guide you.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question, and this is another one for you, Christy, and it's how long does it usually take for a judge to go through an application?
Great question. Some are faster than others. I'm definitely one of the slower ones. I like to read, basically everything I receive, and I go through a lot of the attachments as well. Some judges, will really get into reading the attachments. Others kind of skim it a little bit. So it depends on who you have. Gosh, I would say I probably spend several hours on each application, and Michelle is thoughtful about not overwhelming us with too many. So, and she's also thoughtful about how we kind of mine through those applications and providing us enough time to be real mindful. So figure several hours on your application, and not just by one judge either. So that is not enough time to fully understand your story. As you well know, it's probably a good, few days worth to really dig into your chamber. But as you know, these are busy chamber leaders, and so they're doing their best to understand in several hours your chamber story.
Thank you, and I'll add to that too, and that's exactly why the conciseness, and that's why we have a word count, is because we really want you to get to the meat of what you're trying to say as fast as quickly, so our judges can really understand your story as fast as possible and really get a good feel for it just from the small word counts that we have. And then we do have one more quick one that I want to address that I could take real quick. It says, If your program year runs May 2017 to April 2018, can you include information that in your application that takes place after January 1st? And absolutely, the answer is yes. We're not super stringent that it has to be in January 1 to January 1 of one single year. There is some leeway. We just want to make sure that you're not choosing a program that you did 2 years ago or one that went over a 5-year span. We want to make sure that the meat of what you did took place in the fiscal year 2017. But that doesn't mean you don't have any wiggle room. The judges aren't going to go in and match dates on a calendar correctly and say, wait a minute, you did this after fiscal year 2017. It's totally fine. We just want to put some parameters around the programs that you choose. So please do feel comfortable that you do have some wiggle room with the dates in which your program was created or implemented. And I think that's all the time we have for now. We got through all the questions except a couple that are related to dynamic chamber benchmarking that I will follow up with you on afterwards. Christy, I want to thank you again. Your advice and insight is always invaluable. And if anyone thinks of any questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to walk you through a little bit more. Again, thank you, Christy. Loved having you on, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.